Okay, good afternoon, financial professionals. This is Mike Pinkins again, Regional Vice President here at E4 Insurance Services, welcoming you to the Brew, building relationships every week. I'm substituting again for John Florence, who I understand is biking for the next 5 or 6 days in Michigan. So, John, I hope you have a great bike, and I'm glad it's you and not me that's attempting to do that. For those of you tuning in for the first time today, we always like to start the Brewcast by celebrating today's national days. Today is National Wyoming Day, National Brothers Day, National Scavenger Hunt Day, and I don't think about the Yucatan Peninsula for this, but National Yucatan Shrimp Day. Kind of four eclectic national days, all occurring on May 24th. Now, on today's Brew, we welcome John Hancock's in-house long-term care expert, Jennifer White. Jennifer will be sharing with all of the attendees the topic of state LTC initiatives and what they can mean for both producer and the client. And Jennifer really has a long background in the living benefits sector. She is in charge of and driving sales for John Hancock's living benefit riders, including long-term care, chronic illness, and critical illness, to name a few. And in this role, she works with internal and external partners to develop and provide training, marketing, and product messaging. She has over 25 years in this industry, so she is an expert, and I'm glad that we can welcome Jennifer back to the Brew. Now, a couple of just a housekeeping item. Feel free, if there's any questions that come up, to use your chat box to share your thoughts and or questions. And also, at the end, all attendees will be in a drawing for a CE voucher and a Starbucks gift card. So we'll be announcing the winner at the end of this. Again, Jennifer's going to be discussing state LTC initiatives and what's going on at that front. I think we've all heard of the Washington initiative and whether that's going to come to a variety of states. This is going to cover how to assist clients in developing a plan in preparation or decision-making during a time of crisis. So, Jennifer, welcome to the Brew. I have to say that, and you'll probably get into this, but when I think about what Washington did, I mean, to their credit, they're trying to solve or help solve, a problem facing all the baby boomers. But yet, I also always have a problem with the government telling me what to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome again to the Brew.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. And I think you're not alone in that. I think that a lot of people saw what Washington was doing, which is an A for effort, right? Because they're trying to solve the same problems as your clients, which is how to pay for long-term care. And I think, if anything, this legitimizes the fact that paying for long-term care is a problem in a lot of people, a lot of clients, a lot of advisors and their families. And now the states and even the federal government is looking for ways to help solution this. So it really just legitimizes this as a problem. So I know we don't have a ton of time to get into a lot of the details. So we're going to just do a bit of a high level overview as to what we saw in Washington, what we expect to see going forward, or what we could see going forward. And then, how to get yourselves ready, right? And capitalize on this opportunity. So for anybody who lived through the state of Washington, we know that they plan to implement a payroll tax beginning in July. And that payroll tax will be the equivalent of 58 cents per $100 earned. And it's intended to help pay for this long-term care program called WaCares, or WaCares Fund. And the one thing that I think was challenging with this program, and again, it's great to kind of raise awareness about it, but for a lot of folks, whether younger workers or high income earners, a lot of them are going to end up potentially paying more into this program than they could ever receive in benefits. And you can see it on the slide here, that 58 cents per $100 earned. There's no cap on contributions, right? So people who are working 20, 30, 40 years, and as their salary increases, they're going to continue to contribute more and more and more each year. Additionally, the most they can get out of this program, if they ever qualify, is $36,500. I was asked this week by somebody who said, per year? And I said, nope, per lifetime. So 36.5, if anybody who works in long-term care planning, that's probably not going to get somebody very far. So one of the things I think you probably all saw was people who purchased private long-term care insurance prior to November 30th, I think that should say actually November 1st of 2021, were able to request an exemption from this payroll tax. So we saw this kind of flood of people racing to buy long-term care insurance. And I've done this for about 25 years, and I've never seen people racing to buy long-term care insurance, of course, unless they had a change in health or, all of a sudden they had a family, experience. And certainly not looking at 20 and 30-year-olds racing to buy long-term care insurance, as we saw in the state of Washington. So the one thing, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this, is that John Hancock, we have a long-term care rider, and a number of products are considered long-term care insurance. Chronic illness riders were not considered qualifying long-term care insurance for purposes of opting out of this payroll tax, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the delay of the program has been set now to July 1st of this year. And that was really to help solve or solution some of the problems that, the Walk Cares program had. One of the issues that they looked to address was this group of individuals, you'll see them on the slide here, who would be required to pay into the payroll tax, but likely not able to receive benefits. So you'll see the one that comes to mind primarily is people who live outside the state of Washington, but happen to work for a Washington-based company, right? So in order to receive Walk Cares benefits, you have to remain in the state of Washington in its present day. So for people who work for an Amazon or a Boeing or some of these large companies that are based out of Washington state, but maybe they live in Massachusetts or in Texas or another location, they would be required to pay the payroll tax, but not be able to receive benefits unless they move to Washington. So right now, people who are in these categories can request an exemption from Walk Cares. And here's a great reason to call your clients. We're always looking for that, right? For your clients who might be working for one of these companies that's based out of Washington, but living in another state, they can request an exemption from Walk Cares without owning private insurance. So great reason to call. Of course, veterans with a 70% disability or higher, and some of these other groups will also qualify for requesting an exemption through the end of the year, and they don't need to own private insurance. Some of the things that have not been addressed yet, and they likely won't be addressed prior to the July 1st implementation date, is that portability of benefits. So right now, benefits is still only going to be paid in the state of Washington. One of the other things, as financial professionals who are in this business, recertification of private insurance. So when they wrote the law, there was no persistency requirement. I love to use my Seinfeld references. Anyone could take a reservation, but you need to hold the reservation. You can buy long-term care insurance, but you need to hold the long-term care insurance in order for it to actually do its job, right? To help pay for your family's long-term care or your client's long-term care, but also to help defray Medicaid spending. That's the whole point, right? That you're giving people an exemption is because they have this other thing that's going to fund their care. So they're looking to address that, which has really, I think, helped at the carrier perspective with the concern over lapse rates. But also they're looking to kind of create a wraparound program where they're now going to the carriers after the fact and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we can create this wraparound product so that when somebody's Walk Care benefits run out, they can also have private insurance that would pick up, after those benefits are exhausted. So there's a number of things that they're still looking at. And I think that there were a number of, concerns that were raised by employees as well as employers, carriers, and producers that have yet to be addressed. And it's likely we're not going to see those things come to fruition prior to July 1st of this year. So a number of states obviously are now looking at similar programs. We don't know if they're all going to be a payroll tax. Some of them are just exploring what they can do for informal caregivers, right? They're looking at different ways to help this crisis known as long-term care. But the next state up is California. And I think that what we want to start thinking about is all signs point to the fact that we're likely not going to see this kind of opportunity where people can race to secure private long-term care insurance. That most states are looking at trying to get away from what we saw in the state of Washington that basically kind of created this window of opportunity and almost shut down the entire long-term care insurance market. But really, they're talking about needing to have some sort of private insurance in place prior to any legislation taking effect. And it's important to know that in California, what we saw was, long-term care products, which we'll talk a little bit more about, did qualify for purposes of opting out. Chronic illness riders, although a viable option to help pay for these types of expenses in retirement, were not considered long-term care insurance. So I think it's just important to make sure you understand the differences between those types of products as you're making your product recommendations. So let's just take a little bit of time and look at what's happening in the state of California. So they passed Bill 567, which established their long-term care task force in the California DOI. And what they were charged with doing was similar to the state of Washington, where they're looking at an insurance program to develop long-term care services and supports payments for their workers or residents. So what they've come to fruition with, the task force came with these 5 different plans you'll see on the screen here. They range anywhere from $36,500, similar to the state of Washington, all the way up to $144,000, again, lifetime benefit amounts. As you could probably guess, that most of the folks that they've talked to, consumers in the state of California, all like the $144,000 plan the best. But what Oliver Wyman is now doing, they're tasked with now determining how much each of these are going to cost. So obviously any type of tax will be based on the amount of benefits that are paid out. So the less benefits, the lower the cost, the more the benefits, the higher the cost. So that's what Oliver Wyman is spending this year doing. They will have a recommendation back to the task force for the cost associated with each of these plans. And I think it's important to know that new legislation will need to be passed in order for a long-term care program to take effect. So we're not expected to say all of a sudden, January 1st of next year, California is implementing a program. They do have to pass legislation. So in California, the biggest question, right, is are they going to have an opt-out? Because that's what we're all interested in, is how do we get our clients ready for this? And I know there's like a lot of outstanding questions still. They're still looking at addressing some of like the portability that, Washington hadn't quite addressed yet, as well as that recertification of private insurance. But they are specifically addressing an opt-out on their frequently asked questions, which I linked to in this presentation, and I can send it out after. But they do refer to the fact that people will have an opportunity to opt out if they purchase eligible private insurance that has yet to be defined. So we don't know what eligible private insurance is yet. So they are already suggesting within their legislation and within their proposal is that this coverage, whatever it looks like, will have to be in place prior to their legislation taking effect. So this is really the opportunity to be talking to your clients, right? Like you're not going to have this opportunity like we saw in the state of Washington to wait and see. So it's really, again, legitimizing the fact that this is a problem, getting in front of your clients now while they have an opportunity, while they're young enough and healthy enough to have them, right? Because the younger they are, the healthier they tend to be, and the more options they're going to have available to them. So the one thing, and I think for this past November, I was doing a lot of awareness, right? Because LTC Awareness Month is November. And this was the subject of this past year, which was really to the advisor, to the producer, right? It's just because something looks like a duck, acts like a duck, and quacks like a duck, is it a duck? And what we're talking about here is long-term care and chronic illness products, because they can do similar things for your clients. But it's important to know they're not synonymous. So this is in no way saying that chronic illness riders are bad. They have their place. But we always talk in long-term care about, getting a call from your best client and the client saying, listen, my dad suffered a series of strokes. We're going to take him home. We need he needs round the clock care. How are we going to pay for it? Right? You as the advisor want to have an answer for that. You know what? Your father and I, we did his planning years ago. He has this thing called long-term care insurance, chronic illness insurance, whatever it is. We've got this covered. That used to be the call you were concerned about getting. Now the question is, hi, I know I bought long-term care from you several years ago, right? And you say, well, you bought chronic illness rider. Well, what's the difference? I bought long-term care or chronic illness. Well, they kind of do the same thing. Okay, well, can I or can I not opt out of this payroll tax that's being enacted in my state? So I think that's just what we have to understand, that there is potentially going to be a difference in these products that you offer and how you can answer that question. So for people in the state of Washington who sold chronic illness riders, you didn't do a bad thing for your client. Nobody knew about this payroll tax, right? So this is where that line was drawn in the sand to say chronic illness fits here and long-term care fits here. So when we're talking about long-term care products, those are our long-term care riders, our LTC hybrid products, and our standalone long-term care insurance. And the reason why they're treated differently than chronic illness riders is that there's very different regulations that long-term care insurance has to follow, right? With different reserving requirements at the state level. There's certain consumer protection provisions that have to be included in long-term care products. And when I say long-term care, that's 7702B. You have to, have that monthly charge. You can't have a back-end charge where some chronic illness riders have that option, which are great for accumulation sales, right? You don't want that drag on the policy performance. So the chronic illness riders just don't have the same regulation. They don't follow the NAIC model regulations, which govern long-term care insurance. So although they have tax favored treatment, it's under a different part of the tax code. So everybody, I think probably on this call knows that chronic illness riders cannot be marketed or presented as long-term care insurance. And these are the reasons. They can certainly be presented as something that's going to help provide money when somebody becomes chronically ill, but they're not long-term care insurance. So my call to you is make sure you get your ducks in a row, right? You want to be able to ensure that you can offer your clients a variety of products to meet their changing needs, right? So for people who are concerned, maybe they live in California or one of these other states where they're saying, you know, if it comes down to whether or not a chronic illness rider or a long-term care product makes more sense, this is just one of those bullet points now. I think when you're doing product selection, you want to keep in the back of your mind. So if you don't have your health license, if you don't have your LTC certification, this might be the perfect time to get it so that you are in a place where you can sell a variety of products. And again, long-term care or chronic illness riders are both awesome solutions, but just make sure that you're in a position where you can represent each and every one of these types of products because your clients do have varying needs. So that was my call to action this past year, and it's continuing on. So just 5 things about John Hancock's long-term care rider. It is a 7702B, which means that it is considered long-term care insurance in all states. These are kind of the 5 pillars I like to talk about, and we'll go through these really quickly because a lot of you, I hope, probably know about our long-term care rider, and we could always do another, call about that specifically. But it is a reimbursement rider. And that helps us keep the overall cost associated with the rider down. But really the intended purpose of long-term care insurance and even chronic illness products, I'll throw those in there too, is to help take the responsibilities off the family. And they do that by providing money to pay for the types of care and services people need as they age. And this is what helps keep those responsibilities off the family shoulders, allows the family to continue the relationship with their parents, continue working, continue raising their own families, right? That's not intended to put the responsibilities back on informal caregivers. Because it's a reimbursement rider, it helps really allow the execution of both the life insurance plan and the LTC plan to execute as effectively as possible, right? We're only paying benefits for what long-term care costs, which means the excess benefit dollars remain in the policy or within the rider to help either extend that coverage period, think about an Alzheimer's claim, or just paid income tax-free upon the death of the policy owner, the insured, and is paid to their family on a tax favor basis. And one thing I do want to point out, because I was traveling last week and a few folks were surprised to hear this, that because it's a reimbursement rider, because it pays for qualified long-term care expenses, we can pay benefits in excess of the per diem limit, which is $420 per day, I think it is this year. And those benefits, when we do pay them, are received income tax-free. And they said, how do you do that? And I said, well, because we're basing the benefit paid based on what long-term care costs, as opposed to just somebody being chronically ill, because they're being paid for qualified long-term care expenses, they are received income tax-free, even when they exceed the IRS per diem limitation. And then the last point I want to make here is something called assignment of benefits. And I think this is the biggest misnomer when it comes to reimbursement products, is that a lot of people think a reimbursement product means you have a little old lady sitting at her table, surrounded by receipts, on the phone, trying to get reimbursed from the insurance company. When the reality is that's not what it means at all. Reimbursement strictly means we're paying benefits based on reimbursement for incurred expenses. But assignment of benefits means we can obtain invoices from care providers and pay them directly. So that means we can take the family out of that equation. So when a family is in crisis and there's a need for long-term care, where does the healthcare provider live in that, right? So even if you're sending the family benefit dollars, somebody still has to manage them and get those care providers paid. Real quick story, I was in Florida a couple of years ago, and I was sitting at a restaurant with my boyfriend. On one side of me was this lovely woman, and he was on the other side of me, and her and I got to talking, and she says, oh, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Boston. And she says, well, what do you do for work? And I just about said, I work for John Hancock, and I barely get it out. And she says, long-term care insurance. And she literally cheered, threw her hands up and cheered. And my poor boyfriend is like, of all the people in the state of Florida, we had to sit next to this woman. And I said to her, what makes you say that? Like, most people don't want to associate long-term care insurance when they hear John Hancock. I do, but a lot of other people don't. But the other thing is a lot of people aren't cheering when they think about long-term care insurance. And she said to me, I own a home health care agency. And I said, oh, I go, assignment of benefits. And she said, I always know I'm going to get paid. And it really helped me understand that assignment of benefits not only helps the family when they're in a time of crisis, but it really helps the care provider be able to continue doing that job for a longer period of time and better, right? When they're not dealing with family members who are in crisis, it really helps them too. So in closing, I'm going to just pause on our disclosures here because I know compliance will be very happy. But then we're going to kind of end on this slide. And I think this is the most important takeaway, really, is we all talk about this map where we're looking at state legislation, but this is the most important map. These are the states where each of your clients really need to have a plan for long-term care while they're young enough and happy and healthy enough to have those options. So don't just wait for states to kind of look at solving this. Really talk about this with your clients. Use these state initiatives as almost free publicity, free marketing, right? To help legitimize this problem that we all know is facing clients, which is paying for long-term care expenses. So Mike, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know we went through a lot of stuff really quickly, but I'm sure we may have a question or two that might have come in.
Sure. And Jennifer, thank you very much. I know I'm breaking up a little bit. Where I am, there is a massive storm and wind right now. So my apologies on that. While we wait for any final questions, Jennifer, just thinking about the Washington proposal and the limit of 36,000, the first thought that came to my mind is I just can't imagine the cost that the state is paying to develop, manage, and implement this program, which still isn't really perfect. And, I always fall back to, do you want the government to decide your care, or do you want to be in charge of your own destiny? And the riders and the linked benefit products, they really allow a customer to control their destiny.
Absolutely. Yep.
And everyone has a story, a horror story of someone they know that needed long-term care. And it's a great market to continue to discuss the need for the long-term care with or without state regulations.
Right.
Jennifer, let me look and see if we have any questions. I do not see any questions. Jennifer, we'd like to do you really nailed it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
But now for our giveaway, please pick a number between 1 and 26.
11.
11. Justin Manning, you are the winner of these
Congratulations, Justin.
DE voucher and the Starbucks gift card. Thank you for attending. Justin Manning is the winner. Please join E4 next week as we welcome Mass Mutual's Managing Director of Life, Jeff Murtha, to the brew. And Jeff is going to be sharing with attendees how to use whole life insurance as a diversification tool in your client's overall portfolio to increase the likelihood of a successful retirement, while at the same time enhancing the value of your practice. Thanks again, Jennifer and John Hancock, for a great presentation, and we will see you next week on The Brew. Enjoy Memorial Day weekend. Remember what it's for. It is for our everyone who gave the ultimate sacrifice. So please remember that over the weekend, and enjoy the first part of the summer upon us. Have a great week, everyone.